Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with this week in cannabis news from March 27th to April 2nd. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. And there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place, so you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. We're going to start with some unfortunate news we got out of Germany, and while they're not canceling their plans completely, which I would consider good, I'd say there's a much bigger problem in the back end when you realize that some random non-governmental organization that no one voted for has the power to tell a country that they can't do what's best for the national sovereignty and for the people in their country. And so regardless, we're just going to get into it, and we'll get to that. So Tom Engel, thank you for sharing. Germany's health minister is reportedly preparing a scaled-back cannabis proposal in response to EU concerns. Now, are these EU concerns, or is it concerns from the United Nations, who for some reason, again, have the ability to tell EU nations what they can and can't do for their own citizens? It involves legal possession and home grow, along with non-commercial cannabis clubs, as well as a pilot program of legal sales in select regions. So much like we've seen in Zurich, France, and other countries, but certainly not full-scale descheduling and legalization, giving the plant back for the people, if we're actually talking about real science. And so a few comments down here worth pointing out. Booze industry's got them, that might be true. Also, always suspicious of governments and states who legalize cannabis without having a legal sales channel, because is Germany just going to turn into another New York now? We'd not like to see that, but we're going to get into this link. But first, just wanted to point out how Cannabis Europa recently did this poll asking Germans, how likely do you think a German adult use legalization bill is in the next few weeks? And almost 82% of respondents believe a bill is likely or highly likely, which tells us that most of Germany believes what their politicians tell them. But do you think that they even know that there's this old UN drug treaty in existence, put into place in 1961 by a racist American out of complete fear, no science whatsoever, that could still be affecting whether or not they can even legalize cannabis in the best possible way for the public health and safety for their citizens? I doubt they even know that. But so getting into the story, this is from Marijuana Moment. We're on the right track. We've revised the proposals a bit, Lauterbach said in brief comments on Friday, according to a translation, and I'd love to be a fly on the wall to know why. But he said, we would be returning to the EU soon with a good proposal that protects general health as well as the safety of young people. And anyone in their right mind knows that looking at the data in Canada and legal US states, it's legalizing for adult use and then making it more difficult for children to access it, most likely, but legalizing for adult use has brought youth use down. We've seen that in multiple studies. And so the new plan is a two-part model, first reported by Z, which appears to be an attempt by German officials to legalize cannabis as broadly as possible without running afoul of EU rules, again, or without going against what the UN dictates they can and can't do. First, the policy would reportedly allow limited cannabis sales in certain areas, akin to regional pilot programs, for a period of 4 years. Are you kidding? That would allow officials to see the impact of reform both in big cities and more rural locations. If the program is deemed a success, it could be extended to other parts of the country. And so I'm not going to read through this all, but I invite you to pause to read if you want to just get caught up on all the changes in the last few weeks that, again, require them to scale back their plan. A bit more here if you want to pause to read. I think there's another snippet. Let me see if I can close this. So you can get that to pause to read, because obviously they were planning to legalize. Now, the good news, some lawmakers say they expect to see the details of the revised proposal by the end of April, which is so annoying because they couldn't have just introduced it before 4/20 to at least give us a bit of a break, but it is in line with the May 1st, 2023 date that we had seen more recently. But get this, the health minister emphasized that the coalition government will seek to comply with EU rules, you mean UN rules, while also working to reduce crime and make cannabis as safe as possible. But the irony is we know that launching an adult use program and descheduling is what would facilitate that. But also just wanted to share this breaking news 55 minutes ago. The NBA is apparently lifting its ban on cannabis, a new deal with Players Union, according to a report. So that's huge. I'll put an updated link in the description closer to the end, but love to see that while we get through to the most troubling part of this. The United Nations has made clear that member nations cannot go further than medical cannabis or simple decriminalization under this old, outdated, fear-based, not science-based whatsoever, political science-based 1961 treaty to which countries like Germany and the US are a party. And so obviously it's in the best interest of Germany and the UN, or in the US, to get the fuck out of these treaties ASAP. But it does make you wonder, what is the UN trying to pull, as they've been this non-governmental organization that no one voted for, funded by, say, Council of Foreign Relations, big money like the old Rockefeller family, as if that's not sketchy enough. Now keep in mind, this is just my opinion from reading and paying attention as a fly on the wall over my lifetime. But if you look at the UN's track record, they claim to be peacekeepers, but from my understanding, it seems like they just go into places, create chaos, and then implement their desired solutions to see if they're going to work or not. And something just irks me that they have the same sort of mindset and false frame of the world that the regulators in New York do, hence why a lot of what they try to do doesn't work. But this is even more troubling, as the UN's International Narcotics Control Board, who the fuck are you, recently released an annual report that took the position further by suggesting that the US federal gov is violating the treaty by declining to enforce prohibition at the state level, saying that the federalist system prescribed under the Constitution does not excuse the country from its treaty obligations. So again, unless we have the Biden admin step up and say, no, the US has its own national sovereignty and that comes first, who cares what you're saying? Like, I want to see that. Otherwise, I'm very worried of what might be going on in the back end. So again, I'm just thinking out loud. Let me know in the comments if you're sort of on the same page or if you think I'm crazy. I don't mind. But just to highlight what I'm saying, so while they claim to be keeping the peace and probably think they're helping because they're deluded by their ideology, they're not the heroes that we want, because much like the New York regulators, they think they're doing right, but the road to hell is often paved with good intentions, right? And so I'll just read this first bit because I don't want to read the rest to get my channel flagged, but I'll invite you to read the rest. A Haitian woman was selling charcoal on the empty edges of her small town when a uniformed United Nations peacekeeper offered her a lift in his marked vehicle. Obviously, this man should have been fired a long time ago. I don't know anything about this. Just pointing this out, one example. I know this is generalization, but I have another example to jump afterwards, but you can read the rest. Obviously, not ideal, and again, these people thinking they're keeping the peace, certainly doing the opposite. And this is from the New Humanitarian. Then now, 25 years of sexual exploitation and abuse, a timeline of repeated scandals, reform pledges, and impunity. So again, just highlighting that the UN is not the good guys, clearly with their affiliation to wanting to stick to outdated treaties from the past that serve no basis as well. So it's nothing short of tragic, and you can pause to read, otherwise you can grab the full link below in the description. I do apologize for going off topic a bit, but I know this is a tough pill to swallow, but I wanted to provide some receipts to back up my claims as to why I think there's something fishy going on, especially when Germany, within the last week, what changed that made you backpedal from full-on legalization that would actually be more beneficial for the people of Germany to this, more watered-down version. And so it just confirms that from all angles, as we've seen over the last few years, there are complete attacks on national sovereignty, and that's very troubling to me. Again, pointing out that there's always going to be more crisis that's going to get in the way of cannabis, which is so frustrating. And what I think anyone like us would want to see right now is the White House standing up for national sovereignty. And the worst part is that we hear crickets from the White House. And so I know it's a bit of a ramble. We're going to get back to the cannabis news, but just wanted to share all that. And so Tom Blickman, the favorite EU bear case, who's unfortunately been right all along, but thank you, Tom, for bringing awareness to these old, outdated treaties so that we can at least acknowledge them and know what we need to go after next. And so he highlights some of what their plans will be, and I'll put the links in the description. But just wanted to point this out because this makes total sense, and I didn't even think of it. But when have you heard of a press release from Curaleaf, anyone in Germany, or from a Canadian LP setting up large-scale cultivation in Germany? And so they're almost setting themselves up to be the next New York, as they are currently unable to supply a nationwide cannabis market due to uncertainty about what cannabis legislation in Germany will look like. There's been no investment in large-scale cultivation. Now, obviously, they could import it from around the world, but that doesn't seem to be what they want to do. And so just to highlight, they are favoring a non-commercial home cultivation and social cannabis clubs, which is, again, great for the people in Germany, but as opposed to just getting the plant back, we'd like to see more. And so this is just rounding off sort of the tinfoil hat stuff, looking at the UN and the WHO. I don't know if you're aware of Pascal Nayati, but I believe he's a Swiss lawyer that has a case right now against Pfizer based on all the wrong that they've done in the last few years that they've been hiding. But this is the result of the planned WHO-IHR treaty, same like the pandemic treaty that's been going on behind closed doors that, again, none of us voted for. This is a direct attack on our nation's sovereignty. Speaker McCarthy, we need to arrest this criminal organization, the World Health Organization, which I believe the main funders now are China and Bill Gates, or in the Gates Foundation, sorry. All that to say, does this sound familiar? And I'm not trying to say this is true. I'm just pointing this out because it's come my way and now I'm just sharing. But what changes for my country, my government? The WHO CA Plus establishes a new global dictatorial power architecture to dictate all aspects of human life on Earth, bypassing all legislative, executive, and judicial powers of local governments, and thereby undermining the sovereignty of nations and its peoples. Doesn't that sound exactly like what just happened to Germany when they tried to reform their drug laws to better benefit the people of their state? All this on top of the illegal mandates that we've seen, or the idea of 15-minute cities helping reduce carbon when it's really just going to allow complete control over people, or getting rid of cash and the introduction of CBCs. And so this is all ongoing. It's just crazy to be able to sort of tie some of this up. And Pascal, I believe he has a court case against Pfizer, and he's tweeted before that he plans to take them down before the end of 2023. And I hope he can pull it off, obviously, if this is all true. But it seems like there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and you just got to love to know that there are brilliant people in the world out there fighting for humanity. You're just not going to know about them on the TV screen or anything like that. You got to do your own digging with that. Back to some cannabis news. So Jungle Java, Canadian Securities Exchange to launch a senior listing tier for larger companies. And while we've heard this before, the main development is that roughly 100 CSE listed companies will be gradually transferred to the new tier starting in May of 2023. So next month, not an April Fool joke, fortunately, which will provide them with access to a lower cost of capital and apparently other benefits. And so I don't have a subscription to the Globe and Mail, so I can't pull up the full article, but just wanted to bring this up from Jungle Java as it highlights a bit more that you get out of the article. It's a fair question. Again, didn't they dangle this carrot 2 years ago? They dangled the idea, but the implementation is supposedly going to go in May. And will that help MSOs? Not exactly sure, but the idea is that it will, and so we're hopeful. And with that, Sammy J shares, this looks like all the tier 1s, 2s, and 3s qualify for the CSC's new senior tier, as long as they meet at least one of the 4 requirement standards. And so I invite you to read through this: equity standard, net income standard, market value standard, assets and revenue standard. So a bit more info that likely came behind the paywall that I couldn't access, so just wanted to share that so you can grab that. Well, thank you Cannavestments for doing a bit of a deep dive into Columbia Care's recent earnings, which I did in my last video. So if you missed my weekday video, midweek update will be in the description. But rough finish for 2022 for Columbia Care, with results behind guidance and consensus, margin compression, and more balance sheet concerns in light of a lack of real profitability. Cost-cutting measures and cash flow improvements starting to show, which is a slight positive, but much more is needed. And of course, big thing riding here is the eventual closure of the deal with Columbia Care and Cresco Labs. They have until June 30th to do that. And so more here if you wanted to pause to read about Columbia Care, if you're invested in that company or interested in potentially investing in the new entity that will come of that. And so with that, Columbia Care opens 5th cannabis dispensary in West Virginia. It's the company's 84th active dispensary nationwide. And so 84 for Columbia Care alone would be 84 plus what Cresco has if the deal again goes through as well. And so a bit more here if you wanted to pause to read, but good to see them continuing to expand into markets like West Virginia, smaller, less competitive ones, and provide a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative. And so with that, Verano reports their 4th quarter and full year 2022 financial results. Company delivers record revenue of $879 million, a 19% year-over-year increase. And so good to see Verano chugging along despite having both hands tied behind their backs like all of their MSOs. And so you can pause to read a bit more about management commentary. And again, I don't want to spend too much time on these. I'm just going to relay the highlights. And then in the future, once I get some deeper dives from people who are better trained in finance than I am, I will share what they have to say as well. But 4th quarter and full year 2022 financial highlights. You can pause to read to go through them and just take a look. But main thing to highlight is revenue did grow year over year. Gross profits did grow year over year as well, which is good to see. And much like all the other MSOs, writing off some goodwill and impairments in their Q4. And it seems like it does give some tax benefits to some of these companies too. I don't know exactly how that works, but I have seen that on Twitter. That would be great. 4th quarter 2022 financial highlights. More here if you wanted to pause to read and go through it. While their full year financial highlights and then 4th quarter. You can pause to read for more on the 4th quarter 2022 financial overview. Obviously, you can grab the link below and pull it yourself, but I'm going to make it easy for you, so you can just pause to read that snippet and then this snippet here. And then financial 2022 overview, you can pause to read that down to adjusted EBITDA. And then from adjusted EBITDA to here. Pause to read. And then the last bit, 4th quarter 2022 operational highlights and then subsequent operational highlights. And of course, all the numbers are a bit deeper, but if you want to get the full thing, you want to go to CDAR and pull their 10K once that eventually gets filed. And so with that, we've got a video with the CEO, George Archos from Yahoo Finance. I'm not going to play the whole thing. It's 5 minutes long, but if you're interested in watching, the link will be in the description. Despite the economy being down overall, Verano is set up for a bright future, and we're really excited about it. I am too, because things do look up. Despite having all hands tied behind their backs, they're still chugging along, and that's something I like to see as someone who's been in the game and paying attention for a long time. But with that, Verano opens Zenleaf Buchanan, the company's 5th West Virginia dispensary and 126 retail location nationwide. So much like Columbia Care, trying to expand in these lesser competitive markets like West Virginia and providing a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative. So thank you, Verano, for the work you're doing, much like other MSOs, making Americans safer and giving them the plant medicine they need. So you can pause, read a little bit more out of what they're doing there in West Virginia. While last bit, Verano, much like Greentham, already ready to report their 1st quarter 2023. Or not ready to report it, but ready to report that they are ready to report on May 10th, 2023. And so this will be before the market opens, Wednesday, May 10th. And I believe Greentham's was May 3rd. I could be wrong on that one, but that's also featured in my last week's video. But so with that, on to some state news. The Maryland Senate passed a bill to regulate cannabis sales. So massive to see Maryland take the steps they need to launch this adult use program on July 1st. And so again, slower than Missouri, who didn't focus so much on social equity, but still 5 months is better than fucking year and a half or 2 years like we saw from New Jersey and New York. Lawmakers will now work to reconcile differences with the House passed bill as the state prepares for July 1st launch of legalization under a referendum that the voters approved last year. And so it's a great step in the right direction. I'm not sure if the bills are reconciled yet, and so once we get a final bill, I will report on that so that if you're interested, you can take a look. But Mr. Diesel has an interesting comment here. The body adopted several revisions that differ from the House bill, but they might not all be beneficial. So setting a sales tax at 9%, not great. That's a little bit high. Requiring a process for verifying ID for cannabis consumers, Why? No thanks. I'd rather just use cash, or prohibiting on-site consumption of combustible products. So not as ideal if that ends up going into play, but we won't know yet. Just wanted to add that. And so with that, U.S. Cannabis Council, congrats to Kentucky, Mitch's own state, for becoming the 38th state to legalize medical cannabis and finally acknowledging that cannabis being placed in a Schedule 1 classification is ridiculousness. But the sad news is that the state's medical cannabis program won't launch until 2025. So they've got to wait almost a year and a half to get access to a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative. Bullshit. But its impact could be felt much sooner. Well, let's hope so. So thank you, U.S. Cannabis Council, for sharing this news. And there will be more on this from Marijuana Moment if you wanted to grab the full link and read about what Kentucky's planning to do there. But with that, Marijuana Moment, happy to highlight that Minnesota cannabis legalization bill clears their 14th House committee. Hopefully this is the last one, with revised tax rate and new fiscal note. We're not doing pot for potholes. We're now legalizing cannabis in order to fund other enterprises of state government because we're going to make a shit ton of fucking money once we do this the right way. So good job, Minnesota. Hopefully you can get that so close into place sooner than later. And then thanks, Don Murphy, for highlighting this, because this was a funny instance. A Montana lawmaker introduced a bill to eliminate the adult use market. And so thanks, Don, for highlighting. Here's a little reality check for my pro-prohibition friends. Even red states like Montana aren't going back. And so this is promising to see, because you think once the cat is out of the box, it's not going back in, and it seems to be the case as Montana senators kill this proposed bill to eliminate rec cannabis dispensaries, because if something's not broken, don't fix it, and it's making them way too much money now. Plus, lawmakers should be nervous about undoing the people's will. That should concern them, because that's the most un-American thing any lawmaker can possibly do. So, love to see cannabis remain victorious in Montana. And with that, from the High Times, Texas to expand its restrictive medical cannabis program to combat the opioid epidemic. So, love to see some common sense legislation out of Texas, but don't expect any Texas stoners to celebrate. And while there's no market yet, it's broadening its restrictive medical cannabis program to include patients fighting chronic pain. The Houston Chronicle reports, in addition to expanding approved THC dosing limits from 1% to 10 milligrams. So it's a small step, but one in the right direction. So more here. If you wanted to read otherwise, you can grab the link below. And so with that, Marijuana Moment, as GOP congressman says FDA's lack of CBD regulation is disrupting public confidence in the agency. As if anyone in the public has any confidence in the FDA after the last few years at this point. Not likely. But he does speak some sense, saying we need to quickly remedy what is not working in the agency, institute needed reforms, and restore public confidence. Absolutely, because there's so much evidence that CBD is a medicine, it's helpful, and again, you know my argument for descheduling, but it's time to acknowledge it and give it to access to the people if they need it. And with that, Marijuana Moment, DC lawmakers demand that Congress end cannabis legalization interference at House committee hearing. Conveniently saying the quiet part out loud, that Congress's interference, or the current status quo in this matter, has had a negative impact on public safety. What do you know? Isn't that kind of the exact opposite of what most self-righteous politicians are saying? That we need to keep cannabis illegal to protect the youth and the public safety, when in actuality it's the states that have reformed their laws, giving the plant back to their citizens that are seeing all the benefits and reaping the rewards, and it's sadly states still living in fear and propaganda that are stuck in limbo. Yeah, it sucks to suck. And with this one, happy to report, Marijuana Moment, something that these veterans should have gotten 70 years ago, but military veterans could get medical cannabis recommendations from government doctors under a new bipartisan congressional bill. Now, it seems like this has just been filed and introduced, and I want to track this bill because I think this will be huge. And of course, we need veterans getting access to medicine that they need, like cannabis, not gender-affirming care or any bullshit that's going to tell them what they feel in that moment is more justified than anything that they've ever felt before. Nah, getting them the medicine that they've needed for 50 years, I think this could be a huge step, and hopefully we could see this introduced with a standalone safe. Again, wishful thinking, but that would be amazing, as this isn't just low-hanging fruit coming from the lawmaker himself. It's picking it up off the ground and righting a past wrong that they could have done, say, 50, 70 plus years ago. And so with that, some studies to at least back up my claims as cannabis being the miracle medicine it is. Thank you, Dr. UC Yilka. This is the first time I featured him, but I found this very interesting visual or graphic, but from preprint. We compared how chronic pain patients experience the effects of medical cannabis versus opioids. The positive effects of medical cannabis were more holistic. They affect mood, functionality, and well-being, or at least making the pain you're going through or dealing with more bearable, seems like, and there was no difference in perceived negative side effects. So very interesting study and visual. So I'll put the link in the description, but also just highlighting this up here to share. Very interesting and great study. Again, highlighting that at least having access to a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative is a lot better for the people. And with that, Peter Greenspoon, MD, former Harvard med, sharing another convenient study. We recommend the use of cannabinoid-based medicine as monotherapy, replacement, or adjunct treatment in people living with chronic pain for management of chronic pain, including central or peripheral neuropathic pain. So this is a new study from libartpub.com, but wanted to share it and we'll put it in the description below. And so here's an interesting comment from someone saying, no way, it has never affected me right, let alone the uncontrollable twitches I've always gotten. This makes my peripheral neuropathy pain worse. Twitches, you're going to get twitches from opioids or medicine. Again, I shouldn't comment. No judgment here. I've never had a good experience with cannabis. Opioids work 13 plus years. Why change that? Fair enough. If opioids work for you, keep taking them. But don't make your issue stop other people from getting access to cannabis and a safer non-addictive medicinal alternative that's going to help them, right? Like, that's the whole argument of having the choice and personal choice, which should be, one of America's founding principles. And it's just a tool. So are opioids. Some work better for one patient, another might work better for someone else. We need all the tools available that we can get our hands on, and that is, real freedom of choice. Am I right? And so lastly, just to try and round this all off, I know I spent a lot of time on Germany in the beginning and talking a bit of doom and gloom, but that's why I think we need an American miracle, and let's hope there's something in the making. But just wanted to share this from Jeff Schultz, who does share some interesting points. The state of Kentucky legalizes medical cannabis. That's Mitch McConnell's state. The same week that the WA, Spirits and Alcohol, announces a major campaign to legalize cannabis federally and regulate it like liquor. A BCOB law, what's that phrase we have about coincidences? And again, it's not like Germany's abandoning their plans completely, but they're stepping back. And I'm still curious as to why. And yet, people paid virtually no attention to the no-tide house rules in Schumer's CAOA. I don't know much about that. I must have missed that. But if you know more about that and can comment, please let us know. And how about the Farm Bill, Mitch's baby, reauthorization later this year? Farm Bill and, that whole Delta 8 THC loophole that is causing problems in other states because it's obviously a black market product. Show of hands, who's paying attention? And so just wanted to share this because it's interesting. By this count, we're one state away from being able to ratify a constitutional amendment, and I hope MSOs and whoever has taken initiative, has the lawsuits ready. So Brady, I believe in them, just never seen a coincidence. Good time to be a single state operator that is building a brand. And so have we potentially reached a bottom and are heading up into a new cycle? I don't know, but just wanted to share all the news from this past week. And that is it for today's episode, folks. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update in the world of cannabis. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care.